Alright, now that we've worked on solving equations, we're going to start practicing graphing equations. So we're going to look at linear equations, and we'll know what linear means as we graph them. So let's take a look. So it says directions. Using the equation provided, complete the table of values and graph on the coordinate plane. So we're going to go through example 1, and there's going to be two steps to these problems. Step 1 is to complete the table. We have to plug in the x values into the equation and then solve for y. And then step 2 is going to be to graph those points on the coordinate plane. So remember, when you have a graph, the x-axis is the horizontal axis that goes side to side, and the y-axis is the vertical axis that goes up and down. And these numbers are positive to the right and negative to the left, positive up and negative down. Alright, so let's take a look at our first equation here. We have y equals 2x minus 1. So we're going to use this table. We're going to take these values for x and plug them in and see what comes out for y. So I'm going to rewrite the equation part and replace the x with negative 2. So now I have to multiply. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, minus 1 is negative 5. Doing the same thing, I'm going to take a new x value, plug it in for x, negative 1. 2 times negative 1 minus 1 is negative 3. Do the next value, I'm going to plug in 0. 2 times 0 minus 1. 2 times 0 is 0, minus 1 is negative 1. Plug in 1. 2 times 1 minus 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 is 1. And then if I plug in 2, I've got 2 times 2 minus 1. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3. You could type these into your calculator to get the values exactly as you see them. Or you can use mental math. So now I'm going to take these coordinates for x and y and plot them. So my first coordinate is negative 2 and then negative 5. So I'm going to go over to negative 2 on the x-axis and down to negative 5 on the y-axis and plot a point. Then I'm going to go over to negative 1 on the x-axis and then down to negative 3 on the y-axis. I'm going to go over to 0, so that means I stay in the center, and down to negative 1. Go over to 1, and then up 1, 2, and then up 3. And there is my line representing this equation. So this equation, this table, and this graph represent the same information. Okay, let's look at the next example. Same idea. We're going to take our x values and plug them in into our equation. Let me show you what that looks like on the calculator. Let me see if I can brighten up the screen so we can see the calculator as well. Okay, so I'm going to plug in my values. This time I have negative 2 times negative 2 plus 1. So on my calculator, I do negative 2 times negative 2 plus 1. So my y value there is 5. I'm going to do the same thing for the other problems. I plug in the value and then evaluate. So negative 2 times negative 1 plus 1. This time it's 3. Negative 2 times 0 plus 1, negative 2 times 1 plus 1, and negative 2 times 2 plus 1. I'm just going to write it all out and then put it on the calculator here. Okay, so now we can take those values and graph them. So -2, 5. So I'm going to go over to -2 and then up 5. -1, 3, 0, 1, 1, -1, and 2, -3. And then again, I've got a nice line representing this equation. Let's try 2 more examples with some fractions, and then you can try some practice. So this time I have my equation y equals 1/2 x plus 1. I'm going to do the same thing where I plug in my values. So I have 1/2 times -4 plus 1. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 2 times -4 plus 1. So that gives me -1. Then it's going to be 1/2 times -2 plus 1. That gives me 0. 1/2 times 0 plus 1, 1/2 times 2 plus 1, and 1/2 times 4 plus 1. So let me put those values in. And now I can graph those. So I'm over at -4, -1, -2, 0, 0, 1, 2, 2, and 4, 3. So there's the equation for my graph. Let's try one more example with a negative fraction. So this time I'm just going to write it down. -1/2 times -4 minus 1. -1/2 times -2 minus 1. -1/2 times 0 minus 1. -1/2 times 2 minus 1. And -1/2 times 4 minus 1. So this time I just have to put that negative sign in front. And I'm subtracting 1 instead. So the first point is a 1. Then 0. Then, oops, made a mistake. Put an extra parentheses there. And the last one's going to be -3. Show you on the calculator. Oops. That should be a +4, not a -4. And now I can graph again. -4, 1, -2, 0, 0, -1, 2, -2, and 4, -3. Again, you get a nice straight line from our equations. So in summary, a linear equation is an equation whose graph is a straight line. So when you graph it, you should get a nice straight line. And then those points on the line are all solutions to the equations. So those points make the equations true. And that's graphing equations. So we'll continue practicing this and finding other information out like slope, y-intercept, and other parts of the graph that we can interpret.